Hello, everyone. Hope your week's going all right so far. And if you're celebrating the holidays, I hope that's going smooth too. Just a quick reminder, whatever you believe or don't believe about the holidays, remember what they're really about. It all comes down to the golden rule. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. And honestly, there's no better gift than the gift of giving. So about the new voice. Yeah, I know it's different. I've got a sore throat, so I figured we'd give this AI voice a shot. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't worry though, my usual deep voice will be back soon enough. Now today, we're diving into fear again, but this time with a focus on the ego, how it uses fear to keep you in check. We talk about fear a lot in these real talks, because let's face it, almost every tough emotion, challenge, or roadblock you hit in life has fear sitting at the root of it. That was true for us too, which is why we think it's a topic worth coming back to. All right, let's get into it. Fear? It's everywhere. It's that little voice in your head saying, "Don't do it, you're going to screw it up." Or, "What if this doesn't work? What if they think you're an idiot?" Sound familiar? Yeah, me too. That's your ego talking. Now, before you roll your eyes, let me explain. The ego? It's not this evil thing. It's not out to destroy you. It's just that part of you that's obsessed with staying in control. The problem is, the way it tries to stay in control is by feeding you fear. Why? Because fear keeps you small. It keeps you in your lane. It's like, don't step out of line, don't take risks, don't get hurt. And yeah, that might have worked when we were cavemen trying not to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. But today, that same mindset just keeps you stuck. Let me ask you this. How much of your day do you spend thinking about all the things that could go wrong? Or how you're not good enough? Or what someone else might think of you? That's the ego, man. It's like this loud, obnoxious roommate in your head that just won't shut up. And trust me, it's got one goal: to keep you in fear, so it can stay in charge. Here's the thing, though. The ego isn't you. I want you to get that. That voice in your head, that's just a scared little part of you trying to run the show. But you're bigger than that. You've got a higher self, a part of you that's calm, grounded, and not driven by fear. The trick is learning how to tell the difference between the two. So I want to dive into why the ego clings to fear, how it shows up in your life, and more importantly, how to shut it up so you can live from a place of love and connection instead of anxiety and control. All right, let's break this down. So let's talk about why the ego loves fear. Here's the deal. Your ego's job is to keep you safe. That's it. It's not interested in your happiness or your growth. It just wants to make sure you don't get hurt, physically or emotionally. The problem is, the ego's version of safe is stuck in survival mode. Back in the day, that meant looking out for stuff like, "Hey, don't go near that lion," or "Stay close to the tribe so you don't get eaten." Fair enough, right? But now, that same fear mechanism kicks in for stuff like, "Don't speak up in that meeting, you might embarrass yourself." Or, "Don't tell someone how you really feel, they might reject you." It's like the ego hasn't gotten the memo that the stakes aren't life or death anymore. But here's the kicker. The ego doesn't just feed on fear, it needs it. Fear keeps you small, keeps you doubting yourself, and that keeps the ego in control. Think about it. When you're scared, you're not living in the moment. You're stuck in your head, overthinking everything, playing out every possible worst-case scenario, like it's some kind of disaster movie. And as long as the ego's got you spinning like that, it's running the show. Now let's be real. This isn't some woo-woo spiritual thing. It's just how our brains are wired. But the good news? You can quiet that voice. The first step is knowing when it's the ego talking. Here's how you know. If the thought starts with, "What if?" and it's negative, that's your ego. If you're stuck comparing yourself to someone else, like, "They're doing so much better than me," that's the ego. Or if you catch yourself thinking, I can't do that, I'll fail. Guess who? Yep, your ego again. Once you start noticing this stuff, you've already taken power away from it. The ego hates being called out. It thrives in the shadows. So just shining a light on it and saying, I see you, is a game changer. I'll tell you a quick story about how fear held me back and how I finally shut it down. For years, I had this fear of messing up in relationships. I'd been through some tough breakups, and every time the ego was right there saying, see, you're not good at this. Don't even bother. So I'd go into new relationships with my guard way up, overanalyzing everything. I wasn't living in the moment. I was living in my head, convinced that if I wasn't perfect, or if the other person saw my flaws, it'd fall apart. That fear of making the same mistakes, it kept me from being real, from letting anyone get close. And honestly, it was exhausting. One day, I just hit this point where I thought, what am I so afraid of? Rejection. Pain. I've already survived that, and I'm still standing. It was like I realized the ego wasn't protecting me. It was just keeping me stuck. So I made a choice. I started paying attention to when that voice of fear popped up. And instead of listening, I'd ask myself, is this fear or is this me? Is this helping me or is it holding me back? It wasn't overnight, but when I started quieting that voice, things shifted. I became more open, more vulnerable. And guess what? That's when I found real connection. That's when love showed up. Not because I was perfect, but because I finally let myself be human. All right, but you're probably asking, how do I actually quiet the ego and stop letting fear run the show? Let me break it down for you. First, call it out. When you notice yourself spiraling into fear, whether it's about a relationship, work, or anything else, pause for a second and ask yourself, is this my higher self talking, or is this just my ego freaking out? That one question can make a huge difference, because when you realize it's the fear talking through the ego, it takes away a lot of its power. Next, shift from fear to curiosity. Instead of thinking, what if I fail? Put it in reverse and say, what if this works out? What if I learn something amazing from this? See, fear locks you into the worst-case scenario, but curiosity, that opens up possibilities. Third, focus on staying in the present. Because here's the thing, fear doesn't live in the present. It's always stuck in the past, reminding you of what went wrong or jumping into the future, imagining what could go wrong. But right now, in this moment, you're okay. So take a deep breath and ask yourself, what's actually true right now? Most of the time, the present isn't half as scary as the ego makes it seem. And finally, choose love over fear. When you feel stuck, ask yourself, what would love do right now? Because love takes risks, it forgives, it connects. Fear, it hides. It tries to protect, but it isolates. Which one do you really want leading your experience? Love or fear? At the end of the day, the ego's always going to try to keep you in fear. It's just doing its job. But you don't have to let it run your life. When you recognize it for what it is and choose to live from love instead, that's when everything changes. So next time you hear that voice saying, don't do it, you'll fail. Or what if it all goes wrong? Take a breath, call it out, and remind yourself, you've survived worse, and you're stronger than you think. The only way to grow is to stop letting fear hold you back. You've got this. We love you all. Have a safe and joyous holiday season. Walk in light.
Until next time, my friends, I ask all people everywhere to plant seeds of love, peace, joy, and oneness.